Hello and welcome back to the Purposeful Shift. I'm Emma Bryant and this podcast is a weekly moment of calm, clarity and connection for women navigating change. If you've been listening over the past few episodes, you might recall that we've been talking about purpose, about that inside nudge that something might be shifting inside of us, and about the questions that start to arise when we realise that we want our lives to feel more intentional. But today's episode is about something that can be really easily overlooked in conversations about change. And that is the power of taking time to pause. For some women, they might reach a place of burnout or be close to burnout before that they realise that what they might need most is actually space rather than another plan of action. So they might need space to think, reflect, breathe, and reconnect with themselves. In today's episode, I'm going to explore why so many of us struggle with slowing down and why pressing pause can sometimes be the most productive thing that you can actually do. So let's start with something that I imagine many of us have been conditioned to believe, and that is that our level of productivity equals our worth. That if we're not consistently doing something, that we're somehow falling behind. I heard an expression once that I'm slightly ashamed to say that I still use myself. And that is that if we're standing still, we're actually going backwards. So based on the premise that life is moving around us, time is always moving forwards. So if we are standing still, we're actually going backwards and we have to keep moving forwards just to maintain our current position or move forwards at a faster speed to move forwards from where we currently are. It's an interesting thought and it might be serving you in some situations. I know for me it has at times, but in others it could actually be quite a damaging perception for us to have and a thought that we can circle around that might not be doing us any favours. Another thing I used to say all the time when people would say to me, "Hi, how are you?" I'd say, "Yeah, I'm good. I'm keeping busy." And I think that comes from the idea, and maybe it's more for women, but that we need to be busy or that we just are busy because we're always busy doing things. So we're doing things for our families, we're doing things for our careers, we're doing things for our partners or our children or our colleagues or our communities. Maybe we're volunteering, we're connecting, we're networking, we're growing, we're upskilling, we're learning. There's always various things that we do, some of which we perhaps disguise as being productive, and some of which will actually be genuinely productive for us. And somewhere along the line, we seem to have absorbed this unspoken belief that our value, our personal value, comes from how much we can carry in our lives and what we can organize and what we can manage and what we can achieve. And we become these perfect planners, the carers, the problem solvers, the ones who hold everything together. In work once, we used to refer to a colleague as our glue, joining our team together. And interestingly, the Mother's Day card that my very thoughtful son gave to me last weekend actually says inside, verbatim, "You're the backbone of the house, the glue of the family." So now I'm wondering how I'm living in that identity in a way which my children are picking up on and then perceiving as normal. Like it's the woman's role in the home to glue everything together, to be the backbone. And I think that's probably a whole nother conversation to be had at another time. But when we spent years living in that mode, that mindset of being busy, the idea of slowing down can actually feel incredibly uncomfortable, because when we stop doing things, when we stop doing stuff, when we stop being busy, the chances are that something else is going to show up. And that's probably going to be your thoughts or your feelings or questions that you've been too busy to ask yourself. And I think that can be quite confronting, because we might have been avoiding those questions or those thoughts or those feelings. We might have been avoiding making difficult decisions. And I know I am certainly guilty of that. I'm procrastinating on decisions under the disguise of busyness quite often. And I think there's also a fear that slowing down somehow means failure. or a thought that if I stop pushing, will everything fall apart? So key that idea that I'm the glue. Or if I pause, will I lose momentum? And again, we can key the idea that we have to be moving forward or you're going backwards. You can't afford to stand still. Or if I rest, will people think I'm lazy or I'm unmotivated? And hello, self-care. But what's interesting is that when we look at nature, or even at how our own bodies work, we can see a completely different rhythm because everything moves in cycles. We have day and night, we have seasons of growth and rest, we have energy and recovery. Those cycles are needed in nature, they're needed in biology. Yet somewhere along the line, our modern life has convinced us that we're supposed to operate at full speed all of the time. And I think we know deep down that operating at full speed all of the time is simply not sustainable. And yet we still push and we push and we push and we try and we achieve this busy, high-speed version of life that I think for many of us just won't be fulfilling. So our bodies and mind are quite good at letting us know when something needs to change. And often those little signals can start quite quietly. So perhaps you might notice yourself becoming more irritable than usual, or things that wouldn't normally bother you suddenly start to feel overwhelming. Perhaps you feel constantly tired, even if you're getting your suggested 8 hours of sleep every night. Or maybe there's a disconnection. Perhaps you're going through the motions of daily life, but something just feels slightly off, or it's a bit flat or a bit distant. Another sign that women might describe is low creativity. So ideas stop flowing and motivation dips, and you don't enjoy all of the things that you used to love to do, hobbies that you used to have. And perhaps tasks that once felt exciting to you start to feel heavy or draining. And sometimes there's simply this quiet sense that you've been moving so fast for so long that you've actually lost track of what you're moving towards, what your goal is. And I think if any of those feelings sound familiar, it might be a sign that your body and your mind are asking you to stop and take a pause. And that doesn't have to be a long pause. It's just long enough to give yourself space to breathe and to listen. So when I talk about pausing, I'm not suggesting that you need to go and disappear for 3 months on a silent retreat. Although if that sounds appealing, I would not blame you for giving that a go. And a bit of a side note, a friend of mine actually did a 7-day silent retreat at the end of the year last year and found it to be absolutely incredible. And when she described it to me, all I could think was, I don't think I could sit still for an hour, let alone all day, every day. But pausing can actually be really easy and simple for us to build into our lives without having to travel around the world to find silence. It's about creating small pockets of space where you can give yourself time to check in. So I've got 3 gentle ways that you can begin. So the first one is morning journaling. It's one of the simplest practices, and you can just spend a few minutes writing in the morning. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. You don't need to overthink what you're writing. It's just a quiet moment with a notebook. And you might ask yourself questions like, what do I need today? But please, please, please do not ask yourself, what should you do today? It's not a to-do list. It's not identifying that list of things, the actions you need to take, the things that are going to help contribute to those feelings of overwhelm. It's what you actually need. And some days the answer might be clarity. Some days it might be patience. Some days it might simply be rest. And writing it down helps you to reconnect with your inner voice before the noise of the day takes over. So it's a really good idea to do this as soon as you wake up and before you look at your phone. Please do not look at your phone and then do this exercise, because it just will not serve you in the same way. So the second one is to take walks in nature, preferably without your mobile phone. So stepping outside can be a really powerful way to pause. And it might sound a little bit simplistic, but I do urge you to try doing it without your phone if you can. No podcasts, no messages, no notifications, just you walking and being fully present in your surroundings. because nature has a really remarkable way of slowing down our thoughts. When we remove that constant input, our minds will begin to settle. And often in those quiet moments, that's when we find ideas or clarity or new perspectives. And you might notice something that you hadn't thought about before, or you might simply feel calmer. Both are really valuable when you're looking to slow down and pause, and a really great way to inject that pause into your daily life. So the third thing is a monthly life check. And I like to think of it as a little bit like a monthly life audit. So in the same way you might audit your business or work that you're doing, we can do this for ourselves. So just once a month, we can give ourselves the gift of half an hour or so to sit down and ask a few reflective questions. So for example, you might ask yourself, what has been energizing you lately? Or what has been draining you? What are you enjoying? And what are you tolerating? What feels aligned to you? And what doesn't feel aligned in your life? And these kinds of questions can sound quite simple, but can sometimes be quite challenging to answer. They can help you gently course correct before your life feels like it's drifting too far away from what actually matters to you. So you could think of it as checking your internal compass. And if you're really clear on your direction, if you've got your North Star, if you know where you're heading, then you might find these exercises and these reflections quite easy. But if you're a little bit unsure, then this can be a great way of identifying what your values are and what's really important to you right now, and resetting your direction so that you are back on the right course that makes you feel fulfilled and less overwhelmed. As a reminder, taking time to pause is good for us. One of the most helpful shifts that we can make is to stop seeing pausing and taking time to slow down as something that we only do when we're overwhelmed. Instead, we should start to think of and treat pausing and slowing down as part of our life rhythm. It's something intentional that we do. So you might schedule a small weekly check-in with yourself, just like setting a meeting in your diary, except this meeting is a one-person meeting. It's just with you. It could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. It really doesn't matter. You'll find your length, the optimum length that works. Just give yourself enough time to ask and to reflect and to think on questions like, how am I feeling? What's working for me? What needs adjusting? And when we do this regularly, that pausing becomes something really proactive for our well-being rather than something that's reactive when we're facing burnout or feeling really stressed and overwhelmed. And this is where some of the biggest mindset shifts can happen. Please remember, pausing in this context, it's not procrastination. It's with structure. It's preparation. You are providing yourself with a space where you can find clarity, where you can develop ideas, and really importantly, where you can reconnect with your own voice rather than constantly being bombarded with those expectations that others around us will place on us. It's really important that our voice is heard, and we do that for ourselves as often as we can. So before I finish today, I'd like to leave you with a couple of questions to reflect on. I will add these to the show notes along with the questions that I've mentioned earlier to help you with your pauses and your reflections. And the questions are, what do you actually want more of in your life? And what are you ready to let go of? Sometimes these answers might come quickly to you. Sometimes they will take a little bit longer, and the speed isn't important here. What is important is that you are giving yourself the space and the time to ask those questions and to think about them and to reflect on them and to be honest with yourself and to make a note of the answers and see how they change each time you take the time to pause and reflect. If you have been feeling overwhelmed lately, please take this episode as your gentle invitation to slow down and to pause and to breathe. If you are looking for some clarity in your life, it's unlikely to arrive when you're rushing. It tends to arrive when we create space for it. And there's an old Zen saying, and it is that you should sit in meditation for 20 minutes a day, unless you're too busy, and then you should sit for an hour. There's various interpretations of this saying, such as the importance of regular meditative or reflective practice, as well as the importance of making time to be still. So I'll leave that thought with you. If today's episode resonated with you, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified of future episodes which are released weekly on a Sunday. Please also feel free to share this episode with a friend who could also use a little permission to pause and slow down. And if you'd like to connect, you can find me on Instagram at the Purposeful Shift. I'd love to hear what's been coming up for you as you've listened. Thank you so much for being here. Next week, we are letting go of the shoulds and exploring what success really looks like when we define it on our own terms. Until then, please take good care of yourself and keep listening to that quiet nudge.